Okay, welcome to another episode of AI for Real, the podcast that is brought to you by the Lisbon AI Conference. Today we have our guest Steve from TLDraw, and
Oh,
I think Steve, you are the only. I'm not sure about this, but it's probable that you are the only speaker that has a background in arts and not in tech.
I don't know. I given a quick scan to the other speakers. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. My background.
That's not something like we hear every day, moving from arts to tech. How was that path?
So I studied fine art, so I was a painter, and uh, did some performance work as well. Did a lot of like writing about art and curating back when I lived in Chicago.
Okay.
Uh, Honestly, I think the move into tech. I mean, I got in as a designer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a lot of the work, as an artist is thinking about, viewers and audience experience and like how are people perceiving the work that you create or the work that you put together. And yeah, that translated really well into thinking about user experience as well. And then I think the way of working in as an artist of kind of like doing the same thing many times over and over again, trying to see what you can do better, but also like really drilling into like, okay, what about this is interesting to me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is Yeah, I got a lot out of that. Once when I kind of moved those same ways of working and ways of setting priorities and stuff into tech, I don't know, interesting things happened. I had already spent a lot of my life alone in a studio trying to think of like, okay, what do I want to do? What's interesting to me? And you develop ways of being productive
Mm-hmm.
like without any external constraints. So compared to that, you know, tech as an industry that has so much like reward for hard work and so much
That,
reward for like
that's right.
creative thinking, compared to art where you're really, it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to build a career and build I don't know, get paid or whatever, stop
Yeah.
working at the bar, uh, and
Like
and
live
yeah, yeah,
only
yeah, like
from
yeah,
work.
like uh, be a full time artist and stuff is a very
Mm-hmm.
hard thing to achieve. Even for people with successful careers, it's hard. But also, like there are no constraints, and so that's the trade off. And then in tech, you have a user, you have an application, you have like something that you're trying to build or something that you're trying to do, and by comparison, it just was so easy. I mean, like because people are telling you what to do essentially, or telling you like, here's what success would look like, or here's what we need, or here's what and some of that
Mm-hmm.
is coming from yourself as well, myself. So it was a really fun transition from artist into designer, and then from designer to technical designer, and then getting into creative tools as a field specifically, and then being able to, I suppose, start my own company and start my own product, and do some open source work as well, like all in
Mm-hmm.
the kind of this field of creative software. And yeah, so far so good. It's still what we're doing.
What was your first job in tech? Like,
Ooh.
how was that like breaking moment where you stopped working as an artist and then?
Yeah, so I when I moved to the UK, I had a studio near Cambridge, at the Wising Art Center, which is a fantastic place. And then I was, just working like a jobby job in town, like a normal day job. Uh, and I switched into design, learned Adobe InDesign because in
Mm-hmm.
Cambridge there's a lot of publishing houses, so I figured I'd get a job there, and I did. Um, and then I got into, I think the track was like, I got into ebooks and like typesetting ebooks. And then I
Okay.
got into, which are really interesting. They're just HTML, by the way. They're like HTML and CSS, like an EPUB. And then I got into like interactions within these types of books of like, oh, this is kind of like the future of
Mm-hmm.
digital media is this more interactive stuff. And then from there, I was like, oh, well, this is kind of like where web design is right now. I hadn't paid attention to where web design was for like 8 years, and it had changed a lot. And mobile design and all the kind of the things that had
What
happened between 20.
When was this?
This
Like
was
what year?
20. This was only like 2016 to 2017.
2016. Okay.
So by 2017, I had kind of identified, okay, this is a kind of career path that I want. I want to get into digital product design.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had like a little bit of technical skill from designing websites, like portfolio websites for myself and for
Yeah.
other artists. But I didn't know JavaScript. They had done a bunch of like WordPress websites. But I still knew a little bit of enough to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went really hard into that and began learning to code. This was at a time where Framer was still this like programming tool. And I
Okay.
fell in love with that product. It was, the first time I was using like a live reloading IDE where like I could change a color over here and it would change over there, and I'd like add something here and it would show up over there. And that was way
We've come a
different.
long way now.
Yeah. Like, because like the last time I touched any sort of code stuff, you were dropping stuff into an FTP server, and like,
Mm-hmm. cPanel.
yeah, exactly. And developing in prod, whatever, it was
Mm-hmm.
just chaos. But they're very chaotic. Uh, and yeah, within, I think took my first contracts after maybe, I gave myself 6 months. I was working at a job I didn't like in typesetting
Mm-hmm.
in Cambridge, and I'm like, 6 months I want to be like doing this stuff full time. And I think I started picking up my first contracts after 3 months, and then yeah, right around the 6 month period, I got a position with this pretty wild film company that was building a digital component to
Okay.
go with their experimental art film, and that art film was the bridge between my fine art career and into product design. And then I started working at a startup later on that year. So yeah, it was about 9 months before I was, out of my somewhat miserable job in Cambridge and living in London and working as a designer, and then probably changed jobs like every 3 to 6 months for the next couple of years,
Yeah.
maybe like 3 months to a year, and just was trying to find find my
Mm-hmm.
role or find my level
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Yeah.
And then fast forward to now, you've co-founded, or are you a solo founder?
Solo founder, yeah.
Okay.
So I had a open source project or a couple of open source projects related to design and like visual algorithms, I suppose, around
Okay.
design. One for arrows, another for digital ink, like pressure sensitive digital ink, and playing around with like vectors and curves and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I'd made a project called globs.design, kind of an experimental design tool is what it grew into around this little like primitive of two circles and two curves. And then those projects were getting really a lot of attention. I was getting offers from like your Figmas and your Adobes and stuff. And I and then I started this like the next natural thing to do, which was just like, all right, let me just make a whole, canvas design tool,
Mm-hmm.
essentially like an open source, kind of like Figma or Miro or, lightweight type of thing like that. Because I just kept on building these types of applications, and I was kind of seeing the patterns, and I wanted to make something pluggable, and I wanted to make something more ambitious. And I was like just in love with the problem space of like building these design tools. And that got a ton of traction, both because people liked using the product, but also it turned out there was like a whole lot of like pent up demand for building these types of products. But it's really, really hard to build this type of like canvas product.
What's the biggest challenge?
I think there's some big ones like,
Because
you essentially have to build yeah.
don't get me wrong, but it's like it looks like a simple product, like it's
Yes,
a
absolutely.
canvas.
And if I've done my job right, then it should look like a very simple product. Like it should look
That's the
like
magic.
something, yeah. Because it's the way that we are used to interacting with stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you touch this and move them over here and resize them and like wonderful. Like the interactions are so natural to yeah. Like there's a reason why we have graphical software and why we have a desktop on and Windows and stuff like that. Like you can resize and stuff. It's like a really good way of working with information. But to do that, to make your own kind of Miro or make your own kind of Figma, you need to come up with a very performance way of structuring data that also works like reactively, so that like, a parent will change the position of his children, all that type of thing. And that can work in a collaborative environment. So like create diffs of here's what's changed and synchronize that between clients. And you kind of have to solve that whole problem at once, in that like if you solve part of it and then you try and solve the next part and you try and solve the next part, it doesn't work. Like you need a solution that kind of applies to like a huge problem from day one and design a solution that solves the whole thing for the data inside of a canvas. Otherwise, like you'll have to start over, and it's really tough. And I've talked to a lot of teams that did have to start over, did have to like, constantly reframing the problem as they discovered new parts of it. And of course, I restarted TLDraw like probably 4 or 5 times, like full rewrites, as I was learning about it, because like it was fun and that's what I do. But the sorry, give me a second. Let me mute that. It really should be on. Weird. Sorry, I'm just closing this. Okay. But yeah, like I had to restart TLDraw like 4 or 5 times in order to, as I kept on learning the problem myself. But I was doing so as a side project, so it was like less consequential. I could do that. Then the other side of it is just, it's not just an engineering problem. It's a design problem. It's like a user experience problem, and that design and that user experience is made up of like hundreds or thousands of these little tiny interactions, these little tiny moments where it's possible to get things wrong, or it's possible to anticipate how the app is going to be used. And those just keep going on for, like, we're still finding little tiny, ways of being like, oh yeah, you're right. If I have these selected and I want to add that selection, but that's behind this other thing, like, how do I do that? Or like, it should behave this way. And because the canvas is so kind of like natural in the sense that like it has this almost like physical logic to, I should be able to do this, I should be able to do that. You have that, like, not all software feels like you should be able, like it should behave a certain way. It just sort of behaves the way that it does. But with the canvas, there's this sort of like,
it kind of feel obvious that there's a right way to do
exactly. And like that the logic of the whole system, like even though I couldn't articulate it, it does demand that I be able to, reach behind a shape and grab something like behind it or something like that. And that is a very, very long tail, but it just goes on forever. If I'm rotating a corner, then my cursor should also rotate. And since the cursor has a shadow, that shadow should always point, down and to the right, because the light source or whatever is up here. And so
it's not rotating.
As we're rotating the cursor, we also have to counter rotate the shadow so that it's always in the right orientation with regard to the top left corner of the screen. And like, it's like reasons like that where I think for a lot of the teams that were excited about TLDraw when I started working on it, they were like, oh, great, we don't have to worry about that. Steve's obsessed with this problem. Let's let him worry about that, and then let's build on top of it. And that's basically been the company ever since.
We've been talking about TLDraw for a while now. Can you explain what it is and why is it different from Figma or FigJam or Miro or Excalidraw or whatever? So
of the ones that you listed, it's closest to Excalidraw. In fact, I used to contribute to Excalidraw. They use my ink and love the Excalidraw team and the Excalidraw product. But unlike Excalidraw or Miro or anything else, the thing that we commercialize, the thing that we sell isn't TLDraw.com. You can go to TLDraw.com and it's a great free collaborative whiteboard. We're always adding new features to it, and it's like incredibly solid. It's also very low friction, so like people don't have to create
Yeah.
accounts to work with you and all that type of
I
thing.
was when I was preparing this podcast, I went to okay, let me see what's the product TLDraw.com. Then it opens the canvas, and
Yeah,
you're like inclined to just draw something.
yeah. We still don't have a landing page for it because it's like I just can't think of anything that is more uh, useful than just like dropping someone onto the canvas. And you don't have to create an account to use it. Like if you go to tldr.com without an account, it'll just save it to your local computer, and you can export it as a file and all that stuff. But if you do want to have it in the cloud, if you do want to do collaboration, you can sign in and that way. But we don't make any money off of that. And the thing instead that we make money off of that we sell is the SDK itself, is the Canvas technology, which is you know, it is a React app. Like even the canvas itself is a React app. There's no like canvas element. Every shape that you see is a React component,
Okay.
returning like HTML and CSS and like normal DOM stuff, which it should, like we've done our job right. Like it should feel just as good as Miro or Figma or any of the other like canvases that have used WebGL and use this like really complex rendering pipeline. But for us, the canvas is just normal web stuff, but it is organized as a canvas. But what that means is that you can, if you're a developer and you're like, oh, this is great because I want to do spreadsheets on the canvas, or I want to do like an AI image pipeline or something like that, or I want to add, my calendar events or my to-do list or this other document type that exists in my app. Like I want to just bring those things onto the canvas. You can do that. You can bring YouTube videos onto the canvas, and you could draw on top of them, like and interleave them with the rest of the canvas content.
Okay.
And the things that people have done with this SDK that we license and sell licenses for are just incredible, and they run the entire gamut from like games, like tabletop simulator type of uses of the canvas, all the way to like physics engines and like line writer type of like things where you have a character that's kind of motoring across these lines, to of course more conventional uses like whiteboarding apps, tutoring apps, a lot of like classroom and education stuff, as well as some really interesting ones around 3D where like you might have the canvas map onto or in front of like a 3D renderer in order to
Okay.
like leave comments or annotate 3D
Like
renderings that
for
you might
CAD stuff and
precisely, yeah, for CAD,
okay.
for architecture, other things like that,
Okay.
which is awesome to see because like the canvas is such a good primitive,
Yeah.
but like the places where we've seen it so far are compared like very like conservative uses of the canvas, right? It's whiteboarding, it's like meetings, in Zoom or something like that. But as a primitive, like a collaborative 2D like navigation, direct manipulation interface, like you can do so much with that. You could build StarCraft in TLDraw. Like it's like I mean, it's just such a good primitive to work with, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just thrilled to see it get adopted. In yes, I'm very happy that companies like ClickUp who had a whiteboard before like brought in TLDraw for their whiteboard, but at the same time, like especially around AI, the uses are just so trippy and so like just they wouldn't be happening without something like TLDraw providing that huge stack of features on which you could build. So that's what we do.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I suppose it's also a good primitive for AI, uh,
Yeah.
and the mixture of AI and the design part, and like keeping a different way of the interfaces that we have right now. Because when we think about AI, at least in 2025, we always think about a text box and a chat-based interface, but there are a lot of stuff that you can do with AI, mainly in design, and I would love to hear a bit more about how are you incorporating or embedding AI into TLDraw,
Yeah.
and
So
like the philosophy of that's behind that.
I think our theory of the canvas is that things tend towards graphical user interfaces. Like, there was a time where all computing was done, in a terminal or in text, and increasingly it just got more and more graphical until you had, systems like Windows and systems like Stacks and other things, right? And that's just the natural trend of software as it matures and computing as it matures. The with chat specifically, like I think the reason why chat works so well is that it works so well for people, and that I can chat, with my partner. I can chat with my friends in a terribly named group chat. Like that's just a thing that like we're good at for people to people conversation. And it also works really well for human to machine kind of communication and collaboration. And I think that the canvas has proven itself really, really good at collaboration. Like it's a really good place to do a certain type of collaboration. And that type of collaboration is, simultaneous. It scales well, where multiple people are doing multiple things, contributing, sometimes interacting with each other, sometimes working independently, but working within the same document, essentially, like at the same time, and able to communicate with each other. That's a really hard thing to do in text, like a ridiculously hard thing to do in text. If you've ever tried to have 10 people working in the same, text document, in Google Doc or something, it's a nightmare, right? And it doesn't really work in chat. Like, I mean, you have a kind of a Discord experience where there's, all the threaded conversations that are happening at once, and the application has to make all these affordances for it, or you get the kind of like the streamer type of chat where it's just blowing by at 60 miles an hour, right? But you can have 10 people working on a Figma document at the same time, and it's not a problem at all. And the software allows for that collaboration to happen, in a way that just somehow maps onto the way that we think about our bodies in space, and who's with me, who's not with me, who am I talking to, am I showing people, can I bring you to my the stuff that I'm working on, all those types of things which are very hard to do in other media or other software paradigms. And I think the problems that are in front of us right now with AI, especially with like agents and orchestration of multiple agents and simultaneous work, and how do you observe and kind of shepherd along these AIs as they do work, and also like how do I surface information in a way that is not just a 1D list of text and media. Like how do I branch? How do I kind of like take information and add context to it, really organically? How do I move from unstructured data into structured data? And all of these things are just essentially problems that we've already solved on the canvas, but just not with AI. And so I think AI, as it relates to design, is really interesting because, design is hard and AI isn't good at it, and it has a whole bunch of, problems that the models have had much more limited training material on versus like text. But as it relates to the canvas in general, I think that is just like absolutely the future. And the things that we've done with the canvas so far of, we created probably one of the first like vibe coding tools before it was called vibe coding or even recognized as such, which was
you should have coined the term.
I think it was Andre that coined it, but as soon as the language models dropped, a designer at Figma named Sawyer Hood created this thing called Draw My UI, where you could draw something in TLDraw and click a button, and it would generate HTML and CSS, like generate a website based on what you drew. And this was really cool, and it was gaining a bunch of momentum, but also like we were looking at this being like, oh no, like you have to put this back on the canvas. Like you can do so much. Like, don't just show me the website, like put the website on the canvas. Like our canvas can support that. And so after like 2 days, we were like, all right, we got to just, pull the lever on everything else. And we have to just work on this and do it. And so we created a project that we eventually called Make Real. And this, like, the vision model had just come out like 2 days before or 3 days before. And so we couldn't even, like, you had to enter your API key like into the website. Uh, but that project was so good and it got so popular. It was like 10 million views on tweets and, like, all over the internet, top of Hacker News type of thing of the people who were drawing pictures, and it would generate an image or generate a working website like on the canvas. And then what we learned was that you could draw on top of that working website and then use that as the next prompt, right?
Okay.
Or you could add more imagery around it or instructions around it visually and use that as the next prompt, and then repeat and iterate. And it went from being this like, oh wow, this is a great like one shot, image to HTML into a holy shit, we can actually like use, like, this is a workflow. Like, I can actually work with this. I can iterate towards what I want. I can branch off and do all the other kind of design tool stuff. It was like it's such a cool way of building little software experiences. And it definitely went nuclear. Later on, we did another project with FAL to do like real-time drawing into imagery using Stable Diffusion. That was a blast where, you'd be drawing and like as you were drawing, like as in, milliseconds, you'd be seeing this interpreted into a painting or interpreted into a, anime or something like that. And then we did Teach, which was our first kind of experiment into, well, we did autocomplete, which was nuts. The models are not very good at this, but it was just insane. Like you draw a square and a head, and then it would like suggest arms, and then it would suggest hands and fingers, but it didn't know how to stop itself. So then it started suggesting just like more fingers, like forever, and you could just make these like horrific imagery as the model would just spin out, but it was all visual, and you could just be noticing just how, like the one of the demos I did was like this sort of rabbit duck optical illusion, like where it looks like a rabbit or it looks like a duck, and watching the AI like predict whether it was a rabbit or a duck, like you could really find the one pixel that would like change it, that threshold.
Okay.
It was a great way of kind of exploring the latent space of the model. And then we did TLDraw Computer, which was a project that we worked on with Google around the Gemini Flash model. And TLDraw Computer, it's still around, like computer.tlddraw.com or tlddraw.computer, where you essentially have a flow chart where every node in that chart uses Gemini Flash, uses the LLM to generate some data based on like whatever is connected to it on the other side.
Okay.
So you might have a block that has like a procedure, like you've told it to, okay, like write a story, well, it's going to write a story based on whatever other blocks are like pointing to it using arrows. So you could have one that is your hand drawing of a rabbit. You have the word sci-fi, you have a photo or something else.
You give them all the elements and then just uses it,
and then
in a more visual way.
It'll create that story based on whatever is currently connected to it, and then it'll pipe that forward. So you could, take these elements, create a story, create an outline of the story, split it up into 6 different images and say, okay, create an image for the first point in the outline, the second point, blah, 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 and then descriptions. And you could have cycles, so it goes back and be like, keep going and repeat until some exit condition is met. It's a lot easier to show than tell, but you could do some really powerful stuff with this, and you could kind of do some like hilariously normal stuff as well, like with regard to like computing, like creating a loop or creating like an analysis function that will exit in certain conditions, or will pipe out to a CSV file or something like that, or even hit an API and come back and work with the data.
One thing I noticed, actually 2 things. One is that you get a lot of fun from working in this project.
Yeah.
It's super cool. And another thing is that every product or tool that you've mentioned uses some sort of human connection or like human instruction. And and you actually moved from one shot make real to a thing that you can iterate on based on human inputs. Do you think that this is the way to go with AI? Because the models are getting like more and more capable by the day, and the zero shot or one shot uh, finalized product or finalized flow or whatever, it's what most people sell, but I don't think it's the best option.
No, I would agree with you. I think one of my, the most amazing things, like within the last couple of months, and there's always something new, right? But is realizing that as powerful as these models are, like where you say like, "Hey, generate me a web page or something," or and you look at it and it's like, "Wow, that's actually like really good." But that outcome, that artifact, is like the worst possible way of using these models, right? And that there's actually a correlation between like how good you are at using these things and how good the result is, and like what you can do with this stuff, and like every weekend essentially I try and build something new using just like Claude Code and all that, and it is incredible just how much more I'm able to do every weekend, because
Yeah.
I've learned how to use these things. I think there are use cases for the canvas. There are use cases for these AIs that we still haven't seen before, that like no one has connected. And it is such an interesting time to be building software, and such an interesting time to be designing experiences. But my thing is like creative tools, and my thing is like keeping someone in this super fast iteration loop with the thing that they're building. And I think a color picker is like a perfect creative tool. Like it's solving a thing that is like almost, you could do it in text, but it would be like impossibly slow. But this is a little piece of software that solves like a particular problem in a way that gives you immediate feedback, gives you a very direct way of like changing the outcome, and that you can come back to, again and again, and kind of modify in a way. And I think a good creative tool sort of works the same way. That it's getting out of your way. It's allowing you to sort of explore possibilities, to make creative decisions, to sort of try things and say, no, that's not right. This is more like it. All that stuff. And I think AI is just another tool that we will still need to do that same sort of creative loop for. And yeah, maybe I'm not ready to change the copy on the landing page, but yeah, if anyone wants to know TLDraw for like, well, they're experimenting with creative tools that involve AI, like I'd take that. But the fundamental thing that we make, the intellectual property that I commercialize and that I'm very proud of, and that is like a really hard problem that we really solved really well, is the canvas itself. And so yeah, it's also our job to just make cool stuff with it. Like if I'm saying, take TLDraw, you can build cool stuff with it, then
Maybe
it's
record the
also kind of my
podcast there.
responsibility to show you that you can build cool stuff with it by building cool stuff with it myself. So yeah.
I think I have one more question, because we've seen Sora 2 like launched like 5 days ago or something, like 1 week ago. And we have these other models like the Google Flash, the Nano Banana, whatever, like these image models. They are getting super good at generating images from prompts. But one thing that I think now is that most of these assets are like good starting points, but they are not good assets for people that work with design, because
Yeah.
I don't think they have a lot of flexibility. It's like it's that image, and if you want to change something, you have to generate another one, and
Yeah.
there's stuff that's going to change. Like, what's your opinion on the current stage of these models, and what would you love to see from future models, not only vision models, but any other stuff that the gods of AI can generate in the next few months?
That's an interesting question. I think, there like a bunch of different companies are using TLDraw as a essentially creative brainstorming environment where you're not designing, you're not creating the final output, but you need to like really quickly whip through iterations. So you
Yeah.
can imagine sitting down with like a creative director, designing, coming up with like a new advertising campaign. And in the old days, there'd be someone kind of like Mad Men style, kind of like drawing stuff in the corner and being like this, and like, no, all right, rip it out, do another one. And I think AI can play a role there, where yes, it's slop, but it's like, we just need to say yes or no to stuff. We need to say like yes, more like that, less like that. And I think AI is really really powerful for helping elucidate like the final outcome, and then you get real artists to produce the final outcome, uh, and maybe that'll change. Maybe the AI will also produce the final outcome someday, but there still is going to be a huge need for tools that are nothing but essentially prototyping tools for various media. And maybe Sora is like that, and maybe Runway ML will be the final thing where you let the model cook for a long time. I think what I would love from these models is essentially more specific training primitives that can map onto visual tools and use cases. So a good example of this is Google Flash. They, one of the things that model could do very well is bounding boxes. That you could say, here's a photo, draw a box around, everyone's nose or something like that, or like all the dogs, or like all the motorcycles or something. And much more than any of the other multimodal models or whatever, they could give you back those locations and stuff. I guess it would be up to you to draw the boxes. But that was such a good primitive because you could use that to do so many other things, right? Like thousands of different use cases out of the fact that it could just draw boxes really well. Like we did draw math where you could like write, draw numbers on the screen, and like 2 + 2 equals, and then it would come up with 4 because it could kind of identify different symbols and identify individual symbols within the groups and stuff, and do things like that. And I think some of that just comes from the training material, and like whether there's one of the researchers or the people who have influence on the run to like say like we should really really train on hand drawing, or we should really really train on like perspective and like what's in front of what, or something like these little things that the model can know, but it needs to be given that it needs to be taught, or it needs to be trained specifically on that. And we have all those types of primitives, like it can do JSON format really well, or it can I don't know, like all the little micro things that these models are capable of. I would just like to have more specifically to design. Get it to understand color theory really well. Get it to understand how big something is versus something else, or like being able to know spacing in between, or being able to recognize overlapping shapes. And you'd be surprised how much these models can't do. At the current state when it comes to visual stuff. And we can kind of like hack around it and do more programmatic stuff, or give it, tools like for the more agentic stuff, hey, build this stuff on the canvas, like take the role of a human and build me a diagram based on this blog post or something like that. We can give it more abstract stuff like tools like next to this or above this or below this, rather than having to have it work out the numbers itself. It'll be bad at that. Even coordinate systems, the fact that like its training data includes a lot of Cartesian graphs where the y-axis goes up towards the top of the page and down like -1, -2, -3 towards the bottom of the page. But then on the web, the y-axis goes up, down. The origin is in the top left corner, and the coordinates are flipped, and it'll constantly be like writing things upside down if you give it like a plotter or something, because it's like its data is just confused, and left and right is a really confusing concept, like my left, your right, stage left, stage right, like all that type of stuff. So having a more
like
more
structured
training around those.
output. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I've noticed that because I worked on some applications using the vision models, and they lack a lot of like spatial awareness inside
Yeah.
the images, like what's on top of what, and like
Hmm.
what's to the right or to the left side of something. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
There's still some huge gaps there. So
Okay,
please, if you're
Steve,
listening and you're from Anthropic or OpenAI, like let me know. I have a
improve this.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Steve, awesome conversation. Thank you. Hope to see you in Lisbon in November, for you to talk about what you're building in the conference. That's all. See you in the
Awesome.
next episode. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Come to my talk. See ya.